Today, Peter, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I'm not normally an angry person, but I feel quite angry today, Peter. What can I do?
Well, I can't be bothered to be angry.
I know.
We discussed this months ago.
Yeah.
I said, do you know what? They'll find a new variant, and then they'll postpone it. And I was absolutely right, and they have, and
Yeah.
they can actually do this indefinitely. But if you think about this, they're behaving as if the thing which they themselves have trumpeted incessantly for months, the vaccination of millions of people, starting quite rightly with the most vulnerable, they're behaving as if it hadn't happened. It's as if some lottery winner wins billions of pounds and buys himself a Maserati, and then decides to go round and round and round in an old banger and refuses to drive the Maserati. What is wrong with them? Either this was worth doing, either it had some point, and the whole thing was the achievement they've said it is, or it wasn't. If it was the achievement they said it was, then what the fundamental reason for all the restrictions which has been advanced, I mean, I don't myself accept it, but let's get inside the logic of these people now and assume for the purposes of argument they might be right. The fundamental purpose from the start was supposedly to save the National Health Service from being overwhelmed. And once you have successfully vaccinated with an effective vaccine, almost all the people who are most likely to be vulnerable and who would indeed overwhelm the NHS if they all fell ill, then those circumstances no longer apply. So why is it that the existence of a new variant, which spreads slightly more quickly than the old variant, is the reason for postponing something which was set back in February, at a time when the Prime Minister, so-called, said that you can't just go on shutting down forever and ever and ever. There is no possibility, I think he said in his February 22nd speech, of zero COVID. Why is he acting as if he's trying to obtain zero COVID before he can open up the country? All this stuff about Mr. Johnson being some sort of libertarian anxious to free us from our shackles doesn't seem to me to add up. There's no sign in all the briefings and leaks we've heard of anybody in this government saying, come on, the time has come to, if not now, when? Yeah. The time has come to let's say goodbye to all this rubbish and let the country go again. You get occasional hints, even on the BBC this morning. There was a couple of business owners, they said basically if it hadn't been for furlough, they'd have gone bankrupt. And even with, as you were just saying, the levels of opening that we have, most of these businesses are not making enough money to sustain themselves or to employ people. They can just about keep the lights on. It's like a ship that's got enough power in the engines to keep the lights on in the lounge, but not to actually make the ship move forward. Right. Until you actually open up properly, the economy doesn't start again. And during all that time, the funny money continues to be manufactured, and that funny money is going to come back in the form. Everybody is now recognizing this. I was the first to say it, and I was derided by the fashionable economists. It's going to come back in the form of inflation, which is going to be very, very serious for an awful lot of people, for the economy as a whole, and for the value of the pound sterling abroad. And we're going to pay for it for years and years and years in lower living standards and higher taxes and poorer services. And still we have this ridiculous, unacknowledged disaster of the health service actually being overwhelmed by backlogs. That people not getting the cancer screening they should be having, not getting the treatments they should be having, waiting months for appointments, which before all this began, they would have waited weeks or even days for. It's just not being examined. And the furlough money continues to pour out. We can't just go on doing this as if it was a trouble-free, risk-free, danger-free, damage-free option. Every week we continue doing this, we do more fundamental damage. Just every hour that a heart attack goes untreated or a stroke goes untreated, it does deeper damage to the heart and the brain.
Yes. Well, this is the thing. And they talk about cautious approach and they talk about, safety first. But there's nothing cautious about throwing everything else out the window while maintaining your hold on the one table that you seem to think is of some use to you.
That is precisely the point, and the people who are giving this advice, and this point has been made again and again, they have nothing to lose, the advisors, by saying don't relax, because they're not accountable to the people anyway. The only thing they're accountable to is the risk that if they're right about all this, that more people will die. If they're wrong and more people don't die, then no one will turn around to them and say, actually, you got this wrong, and you should be subjected to huge amounts of abuse, the sort of abuse that you and I have had to endure for being sceptical about this over the past few months. Nothing of that kind ever happens to them. They're safe either way.
Except
And
more
that's the whole
people are,
point of having a government.
except Peter, that more people are dying, but they're just not dying of COVID, which apparently doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a time when I spent a lot of effort going into all that. But a few months ago, I realized that outside a very small minority of educated, rational thinking people, there really wasn't any point. I think at the moment one has to put these things very, very crudely to a society which appears to more or less become uneducated and irrational. The damage is worse if we don't let up. The shutdown has done a huge amount of damage, which will continue to be done as long as it goes on. And on its own terms, it's time that the government relax the rules, because on its own terms, the vaccine program has been successful. They have done what they said they would do. The vaccines work. Millions of people in the most vulnerable categories of the population are not going to fall seriously ill. The hospitals can cope, so why don't we open up?
Exactly. I think one of the reasons I'm more irritated this morning than I am normally is because of what I saw at the weekend with all these ludicrous, G7 world leaders, all of whom are on the public payroll, all of whom seem to think that they know better than everybody else, all of whom seem to be having a very nice time, thank you very much indeed, without doing very much of the things that they tell us to do all the time. And we're paying for it.
Well, yes, and these boondoggles are ridiculous. I've never seen any purpose whatsoever in any of these G7s or G8s or G whatever.
Well, nothing's come out of it that I can tell is worth a fag end, is it?
The basic purpose of summits for the observant is to demonstrate to anybody who hadn't realised it already that police claims to have a shortage of manpower.
There was literally a boatload full of them, 6,000 of them on a boat in the anchored off the coast on a cruise ship. And normally there's 20 of them. This was 6,000.
Well, I hope they had a nice time.
Sure they did.
The thing made me laugh the most was some reporters standing in Cornwall remarking that a double-decker bus entirely full of police officers had just gone by.
I mean, it is pathetic.
You could wait years for that, couldn't you?
Well, you could. I mean, presumably 3 of them come at the same time, and then the point. The other great thing, I suppose, is that it allows the pomposity of the press to fulfil itself marvelously. I saw Robert Peston was moaning at the weekend that he was upset at the response he got from the Prime Minister when he asked him if he was a practicing Catholic, as if that was in any way relevant to the world.
Oh, I don't mind people asking. To me, it's actually an interesting question. But I have to say that I'm not sure I recognise Robert Peston in the street. I long ago gave up watching this stuff. And I used to watch television news all the time and listen to the radio. And I just find the effort is simply not justified by the reward.
No, it's really not.
Who are these people? Why should I care what they think about the news? They've got almost everything I can think of wrong now for so long that it really isn't particularly.
I know. Well, listen, you are cheering me up at the very least. Let's talk about your column this weekend. You wrote about a bakery that shut down, and while you were not entirely sure that it was just down to COVID, I mean, clearly that is having an effect now. And as we now know, there will be people who hear this press conference this afternoon at 6:00 who will be tearing their hair out.
Well, it's very seldom going to be just down to COVID, is it? I mean, I did what journalists should do. I rang up the bakery and I said, "Why have you closed?" And when I suggested that COVID was involved, they got very tetchy and said, "No, not that." But
right.
I've watched that place for years, and there are problems with the Oxford covered market which are not of interest to your non-Oxford readers. But the truth is that I can't imagine the long shutdown of that beautiful, airy, spacious market when supermarkets were allowed to open in the height of the lockdown last year. I can't imagine it didn't badly affect every business in it.
Yeah.
And that effect accumulates. It's very seldom one thing that kills a business. Businesses, people who run businesses, for whom I have tremendous admiration because of what they have to go through, they're constantly being assailed by higher rents, higher taxes, more regulation, more interference, and the general non-cooperation by their landlords and their suppliers. It's an endless struggle. To have a shutdown on the grounds of public health dumped on top of all that would seem to me to be pretty likely to be fatal to a fairly large number of businesses which might otherwise have struggled on for some time.
Well, exactly right. And while we're on the subject of Oxford, I mean, it has been in the news quite a bit lately. I see that the only reason now that they're not going to take down the statue of Cecil Rhodes is that it seems to have been part of an integral building works. So it's part of the building. They can't take it down, which is, I suppose, good news for all racists in the world.
Oh, let me be completely frank with you. I couldn't care less if that statue comes down or not. It's quite ugly. It looks like the statue of a bookmaker.
Yeah. Well, you can't even really see it anyway. You have to sort of look up, don't you?
You could go past it time and time again. I'm a great looker up when I'm in Oxford because it's fascinating. You see lots of things. It's not very far from it. There's a sculpture of a rotting corpse on the front of another building, which I never noticed. But there is old Cecil. And I don't really care whether he's there or not. The only reason that I would... I just object to the idiotic belief that by tearing down statues of this kind, you'll in some way make the world better. But it's any excuse. I think they've come up with a planning excuse, partly because the government, as the Tory government, having realised that for 20 years or so it's been insulting everybody with conservative opinions in the country, has got this new anti-woke policy. Where it actually vaguely says things which are not totally approving of taking the knee, and it's planning people support the Oriel College in not taking down the Rhodes statue. This is a pose as much as everything else that it does is. They don't really mean it, but just for the moment, the climate has changed a bit. There were some very big anti-Rhodes demonstrations in Oxford last year. I haven't seen any sign of them.
No. The latest...
People didn't really care.
Well, the latest is the Dons all saying they're going to go on strike, which probably is a good thing, in my view, saying that if it's not removed, they're not going to teach the students.
I just think that is so petty, and I'm not sure that a university could really accept, if it was a serious university, could really accept any of its teachers refusing to teach the students there on the grounds of a political prejudice against the college they attend.
Yeah,
imagine that being reversed in a conservative way, and imagine the enormous row. I don't know who these people think they are, frankly. You can't, if your job is to teach the next generation, then you teach them.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what college they go to or what statue might appear on the front of that college. It's not actually as if the undergraduates of Oriel College have any say in that at all.
Well, exactly right. Stay with us, Peter, if you would. I want to talk to you about identitarians. I think that's what they're now called, because there's a bit of football to mention as well. Peter, in your column you wrote about Nick Robinson referring to, I think it was an actress as an actor, thereby betraying his kind of his woke roots, if you like.
Well, I think most normal people do still use the term actress. I have no doubt that in time it will be driven out of public life, but for the moment, that's when, if you're asked what Kate Winslet is, you'll say she's an actress. But The Guardian for some time and various other left-wing outfits have been promoting the terminology actor for actors and actresses alike. And I just noticed that Nick Robinson on a Radio 4 item the other day both called her an actor and also referred to her as Winslet with no miss or miss or anything. Now, I was trained in journalism that you only use someone's surname without an honorific if they were a convicted criminal.
Yes.
It was quite rude to use Winslet. But again, the Guardian pioneers this, and the left-wing publications in general. I just get tired of people telling me all the time, oh, well, the BBC is really right-wing. Look at Nick Robinson. He was a young conservative once, a phrase which always sounds to me like thin pig or quiet rock concert.
Right. Well, so was Boris Johnson.
Whether he was or not, I don't know. But he seems to... I just thought it was worth pointing out that he'd adopted the terminology of The Guardian, which is what everybody at the BBC reads and where they all get their ideas.
Well, I thought you might enjoy this addendum to that, which is that over the course of the weekend when the football was on, which you may or may not have watched any of, notwithstanding the taking of the knee scenario, they've now changed the phrase "man of the match" to "star of the match," because obviously they don't want to be too gender specific about men playing football.
Well, no, we can't have that, can we? Because obviously, all these guys. I mean, I don't watch it, right? I'm so vaguely aware of the fact that whenever it happens, it seems to be entirely composed of men.
Yeah.
but
Well,
must be
the other one was ITV. ITV's coverage yesterday. They had the woman whose name I don't know, I'm afraid, but who is the women's Chelsea football team manager, and they captioned her as Chelsea manager. So I was sitting in a room with some people, and one of them said, "Is she the Chelsea manager?" I said, "No, she's not the Chelsea manager. She's the Chelsea women's team manager." But they can't say that because obviously that would be in some way unfair.
Because the two things are the same. Yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, I was in church yesterday, and the word in the very ancient prayer in the 1662 prayer book, the word "man" was changed to "person" by a minister of religion. And you get this thing on the railway that if something's gone wrong with the signals, they no longer refer to the signalman, which of course is the phrase which we all grew up with, and I've no doubt appears in Thomas the Tank Engine and all the other places. It's the signaller. But when I hear the word signaller, I tend to think of soldiers,
yes,
wild signalling with semaphore flags or flashing or all this lamps. And it confuses me completely when they refer to it. I don't even know if there are any female signallers on British railways, but they have to call them signallers just in case there are.
Right.
We are supposed, I think, by all these terms, we're supposed to be stupid. The whole basis, if you can't cope with the idea that man might be used for the whole of mankind, including women.
Yeah, like chairman.
It's not so much the fiddling with the language that annoys me, it's the assumption that I'm so stupid that when I use mankind, I'm actually making an anti-woman or sexist statement.
I know. Well, I found a new sign yesterday, which will please you, I think. I was picking up my children from a railway station, and on said railway, it's one of those old-fashioned railway stations in Sussex, where they've got, it's an outdoor thing, and there's got a couple of benches and stuff. And one of the benches has 3 seats, and on the furthest left of the seats, there's a sign that says, "Out of use, please keep your distance." Now, it doesn't make sense to me, because what I didn't realise, when I read the sign, I didn't know if the whole bench was out of use or just the third seat. And if the third seat is the one that's out of use, that means surely the 2 people sitting to the right of it are too close together. Shouldn't the middle one be out of use?
You'd think so. But again, you're doing this very foolish thing of applying reason and common sense to a circumstance where, in fact, what we are still engaged in is a complete national panic. I said again, the Hitchens quotient. How many people are roaming the streets in the open air wearing face coverings? Continues to rise. And there are huge numbers of them. I think even when everyone's forgotten what COVID is, they'll still be doing it.
Yeah.
Because they like it. And it makes them feel safe. And here we have it. Again, the terror has been spread. People are afraid. They're enjoying being afraid. And they enjoy what they're going to carry on doing.
Well, my children...
You and I may think that the continued shutdown for however long it is that will be announced tonight is ludicrous and futile. But there are millions of people who are perfectly happy to accept, well, if it saves one life, and they'll continue to do it because apart from anything else, people simply have not begun to understand. And the level of particular economic education in this country is so low it makes me look clever. They simply have not begun to understand the profound cost of this.
No.
Way in which that cost will be taken out on them.
But also the effect, and I'll leave you with this one, which my kids told me when they came off the train, that they'd seen a terrible thing at the previous station where an old lady, who was clearly in her 80s, if not even older, got up to get out of the train at the previous station with a Zimmer frame. She asked a couple who was sitting next to the door if they would help her to get out of the train. The man said, apparently, fully masked up, when was the last time that was sanitised? Meaning the Zimmer frame.
Oh, no.
And so they very kindly, and I'm glad I brought them up properly, he refused to help her. So they helped her to get out of the train. But, that's what we're dealing with.
Oh, how awful.
Isn't it?
That's so sad.
Isn't it just?
They just demonstrate. I'm sure, oddly enough, that the people who do this are in normal circumstances perfectly kind. But again, they're so bound up with this fear that some tremendous fatal plague is raging among us that they actually become unkind. That's what fanaticism does to people.
Yeah, it does. And I'm sorry because actually you...
incredibly sad story.
It really is. But you've spent the last half an hour cheering me up, Peter, and I'm sorry to end it on a low point. But thank you for that. I feel less angry now.
Stay pessimistic and you'll stay...
You should rent yourself out as a cheerer-upper. That's another job you never thought you'd have. Nice